Okay, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm Stephen Andersen. If you don't know me, just a running addict, really. And so today we've got two guests. We've got Canada's Dylan Wykes and the United States, Jared Ward. So Jared, you're a 209 guy, Dylan 210, and both Olympians from 2012 and 2016. So how's it going? We'll start with Jared, I guess. I'm gonna have to.
Just living the dream. I've been spending more time at home. This is my gym and my office and everything. I've been spending a lot of time in this room over the last few weeks, and more time with my kids. We made marshmallow guns a couple days ago out of PVC pipe, and so we've been bleeding through those little marshmallows like you wouldn't believe. But it's been honestly, my heart goes out to those that have really been adversely affected by this pandemic. And I kind of feel like I cheated the system because it really has been a fun time for my family. So I'm doing well.
Cool. Dylan, how about you? I think you're in a very similar location in your shed with your weight.
That's right. Yeah, it looks like we have a similar setup, Jared and I. And yeah, same things are going pretty well at home with the kids, and decided to take on a few projects at home. I was showing some of our crew last week. I've built a new fence in the backyard and trying to get the kids involved. So it's been definitely a different time for everyone, but we've been trying to make the most of it.
Cool. So let's start off with some rapid fire questions. I guess to start, we'll go kind of Jared, Dylan, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
So most memorable race?
So that goes out to the 2016 World Half Marathon Championships. It was in Wales. And so there are so many most memorable, I feel like to really have most memorable, we've got to have categories of different most memorables, right? Because I could probably pick 10 races that would be a good case for most memorable race. But this one in Wales is not because I raced well. I actually didn't race that great. It was six weeks after the 2016 trials race. And so I was kind of just recovering from Los Angeles in 2016, but I had such a good time. My wife came out with me, and she was pregnant at that time with our third, but we rode bikes around Wales, and it was a lot of fun. So.
And the weather was horrible for that race.
It was terrible. Yeah, it's terrible.
Dylan?
Yeah, speaking of weather, one of my most memorable races was the 2000, and I'm going to go way back here. I think it was 2007 Canadian Cross Country Championships. It was in Guelph, Ontario, and it was minus something terrible. It was all on snow, and the snow was like extremely hard packed, and it was just so cold. And we had to do the race itself. It was okay. I think I came third, but we had to do drug testing afterwards, and it was like minus 20, and they just have this rickety kind of like tent that you'd have at like a festival set up outside for the doping control. And I was in there for like an hour and a half. So just the whole experience from like start to finish of that day, getting out of the car, showing up and being like, we're actually going to run in this weather, all the way through to eventually, producing a sample for a drug test when it's minus 20 out was quite the experience.
Athletics Canada. Okay. What the race you'd most like to forget?
Oh, the 2020 U.S. Olympic trials.
All right. I think we're going to get into that in a second.
Easy.
Yeah.
No.
Dylan?
For me, the 2012 Lake Biwa Marathon, where I was trying to qualify for the Olympics, I had some terrible GI issues. There was not a day that I want to remember.
I'm not going to ask you about the Japanese guy in the hose. Okay. Favorite workout?
So my favorite workout is 4 to 5 by 2 mile repeats. So there's something to me about like those long intervals that are like they're like a really edgy tempo pace. And I think it's my favorite just because when I get fit towards the end of a marathon training cycle, that type of workout just feels so good. I feel like I'm running so fast, but it feels manageable, and the intervals are long enough that it's not just a sprint. I don't know. So they're probably more half marathon pace, 2-mile repeats, but I love that workout.
Cool. Dylan?
For me, I like workout. We call it in and outs, but it's just kind of like alternating 1K repeats, and usually do it for 15K total, alternating between kind of goal half marathon pace and then the kind of float K is about 20 or 30 seconds per K slower. And kind of to Jared's point, it's like I know I'm getting really fit, not when the faster kilometer is getting faster, but when that float kilometer is, just naturally gets faster without the effort having to go into it. Then you know that you're like recovering really well from running hard, which is a fun feeling.
Please never give me that workout. Okay. Least favorite workout?
Man, any workout when I'm not fit. It's funny how many bad workouts there are out there that turn good workouts by the time you get mid-season or end of the season. And you just kind of got to put your head down when they're not fun. Mile repeats, I hate mile repeats when I'm not fit. But once I get fit, they're a pretty fun workout. I don't know, I guess in college I remember coach doing once a year we would do 4x400 all out with full recovery. And for a 5K, 10K runner, that was too much lactic acid on my brain. I hated those 400-meter sprints.
Yeah, I was going to go with something similar because my speed is not there. It's never been there. And in college, we used to do 20x200, and some guys would just love it. And I would just get chewed up so bad in that workout that it was just, I can still envision some bad days out there.
Right. So 10-mile tempo any day before those fast intervals on the track.
100%.
Oh, I agree, but they're probably good for all of us, actually. Favorite shoe? I think I know the answer to this one, but Jared.
So my favorite's the Saucony Triumph. For train. So again, there's categories, right? Categories, but Saucony Triumph for training. I like the Endorphin Pro for racing. And then I actually like, the Kinvara has always been a go-to shoe for Saucony wearers for years. But lately I've been wearing that shoe a lot more. I really like this Kinvara 11. So 3 categories.
You and I sound like we wear almost exactly the same thing. Dylan?
My staple shoe is the Saucony Ride in my arsenal. So I would wear that for almost everything except for the fast days. And I just got a pair of the Pros not too long ago, the Endorphin Pro. So looking forward to those. Will soon be my favorite shoe. I can already tell.
All right. So last of the rapid fires. If you could do another Olympic sport, what would it be?
Oh, dude, that's tough. Gosh, if I could do another Olympic sport, it'd probably be some winter sport I grew up in Utah skiing and snowboarding, so I love those downhill snow sports. Yeah, man, that's tough. There's so many good ones. Yeah, it'd probably be a winter sport.
Almost every runner I have on says cross-country skiing.
See, and I've never, the irony, growing up in all this snow in Utah, I've never cross-country skied. But I did a lot of downhill skiing growing up.
Cool. And Dylan, don't say cross-country skiing.
Have you seen my cross-country skiing?
Just on Instagram.
It's not very good. Let's be honest. I love it, but I feel like everyone thinks that because they have good endurance that they could translate to cross-country skiing. But I remember talking to John Halverson, who is from Norway, where you like grow, it's like ingrained in people's blood. He's like, all these Canadians think they can just do it, and you've got to like, you know, grow up with it. So I'm not naive. I am not a team sport person, but I think it would be fun to do a team sport, and I always loved soccer growing up, so I would say soccer.
Cool. And there's a lot of running in that too, so that makes sense. All right, so let's get into some more deeper questions, at least on my part. They took some more thought. So both of you are Olympians, as I said earlier, Dylan in 2012 and Jared, you in 2016. So Dylan, you finished 20th, right? 20th? Mm-hmm. And Jared, you finished 6th. So can you walk us through kind of that qualifying process and talk a little bit about your race, but most of all, like the Olympic experience as a whole? And then I guess I'll start with Dylan on this one because you got to meet the Queen, I think. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so London 2012, I guess going into that Olympic cycle, I had run 2:12 at the California International Marathon in 2010. And in Canada, if there's Americans listening here, it's all based on time to qualify. So I needed to run 2:11:30. So I was kind of knocking on the door. Cole's notes, I took a couple failed attempts at it before eventually qualifying at the Rotterdam Marathon, where I ran 2:10 till still my PB today. And that was great and set me up for London. And going into London, it was kind of, I still really wanted to perform really well at my best. It wasn't just like, okay, I've qualified. This is like my life goal. Check it off. I'll just cruise in. I still really wanted to get the most out of myself, but also wanted to enjoy the Olympic experience. So Canada kind of, maybe it's similar for the US, but they kind of have this system where they bring you into London for accreditation and stuff like that, and then send you back out to a training camp somewhere. I was training in St. Moritz in the Swiss Alps, but I really wanted, knowing that the Olympic marathon was on the last day and that I would be back in the village for kind of 3 days or so before the race and kind of focus on my race. I knew I wouldn't get a ton of the Olympic experience just doing that. So I requested that I get to go to the opening ceremonies. So I got to do that, which was an amazing experience. Going through the tunnel into the Olympic Stadium, and we were singing "O Canada" as we were coming in, and that was really cool. One of my childhood heroes, Simon Whitfield, who's a gold medalist in the Sydney Olympic triathlon. He was the flag bearer at the time, so that was a hugely kind of meaningful part of my experience with the Olympics. And then the next day, I got just randomly, there was really no information about it, but some of the Canadian Olympic Committee staff said, "Dylan, can you go to this luncheon at this such and such a place at such and such a time?" And I'm like, I guess, sure. And they picked me because I was there, but not competing within, the next day or two after the opening ceremonies. So I kind of strolled up a few minutes late, and I saw all these people who were like really anxious and like, "Dylan, gotta go here now." Like, gosh, what's going on? And as it turns out, it was like this meet and greet with the Queen of England. So it was for several Commonwealth countries, and I got to do that for the Canadian contingent. And there's a bunch of rules around us, like don't put your hand out to shake her hand until she puts her hand out. Don't speak unless she first speaks to you, and all this stuff. So it was a really neat experience in the lead up, and then shipped out back to St. Moritz for another 12 days or so of training before coming back for the race itself, which went about as well as I could have hoped. My goal, I think I was ranked kind of 40 to 45th in that range based on my time going in, but my coach and I kind of set out this goal of coming top 15 and just kind of looked at the caliber of athletes that had done that at past Olympics and kind of made out a plan. We knew it would be warmer on the warm side, and that people maybe wouldn't respect that. And, people get in the Olympics and think they can just like perform way above where they ever have before and go with lead pack. So I kind of hung back. And I think I was in about 75th early on and worked my way up. But I only got passed by one person, and I ended up passing 50 or so people. I kind of stalled out in the last 10K. As you do, things get tough. But overall, it was pretty incredible. The crowds in London were amazing. It was on a 8-mile loop course, so you did that 3 times, and there was a little add-on at the start, but it was just nonstop. There was a few spots on the course where there were no spectators. I think because of security reasons, they wouldn't let people in certain areas. And when you got into those dead zones, it like my ears were ringing, and you only realize that once you're in those quiet spots, just how loud it was the rest of the way around the course.
Cool. That's so awesome. And I think maybe you should be in one of the future episodes of The Crown.
Yeah, why not?
Okay, Jared, how about you?
Oh, that's fun hearing about your experience, Dylan, from you. I grew up or developed as a marathoner watching you, and so it's kind of fun to hear, to hear your side of it. And man, similar experience for me in that. Making the 2016 Olympic team required, certainly to that point, the best race of my life. And the trials race, the qualifier race, was in Los Angeles, and it was oddly hot. For February in LA, it was about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was around noon, and so the sun was just baking on the roads. I bet the roads were actually a little hotter. And there was an error on water on the course. So we had our personal fluids every 5K, and then there was supposed to be water in between that, but they ended up just putting the water right after personal fluids. And so we just had access to water every 3 miles, and they got sponges. So we were going to have a sponge station additionally, but they accidentally purchased sponges with soap in them. And so when they were filling up these barrels with all these sponges, they realized this isn't going to work. And fortunately, the race, the volunteers that were doing it there recognized that we were going to need something. And so they ran into all of the cheap stores in downtown Los Angeles and bought them out of $2 t-shirts and towels, and then shredded them and would dip those in the water and hand them to us. So I remember the first time I went by, I grabbed like a little shred of a t-shirt, and I squoze it on my head, and I thought, I guess that was worth my efforts. And then I actually, about a mile later, I heard Alberto Salazar yell to Galen Rupp, "Drink from the sponge." And I was like, that's a good idea. And so for the rest of the race, I sucked the water off of those sponges, and it tasted about like you'd imagine, but it felt so good. I estimate by the end of that race, I had to drink 2 gallons of water before I could give them my 90 milliliter sample. And so over 50, I assume that I lost over 15 pounds throughout that race based on how much I had to drink to give that sample. And I didn't pee again until 11 PM that night after more drinking. And so it was just one of those crazy races where the last 3 miles, my legs felt so heavy that every step I wondered if it was going to be my last. And so the race ended up being a very rewarding race to me, even beyond the accomplishment of having achieved this goal to make it to the Olympics. But it was rewarding because I did something really hard. And I think that's what I remember. I remember someone asking me after the 2016 Olympics, if it was worth it, because we were talking about all the sacrifices that my wife had made and that I had made. And I remember thinking that for a while I was like, well, I actually don't know if it was worth it. It was in 10 years, there's going to be, we're going to be on to the next Olympic athletes. And the only people that will remember that I went are me and my mom and my wife. And I started thinking, man, I don't know if it was worth it. But then it kind of hit me that it was worth it for some of these things that I learned about myself and some of the experiences that I had. And when I think of the Olympic trials, I think of a different race than I think most people think of. I think when people want to talk about the 2016 Olympic trials, they want the picture of me at the finish line with my arms in the air. But to me, that wasn't the Olympic trials. To me, the Olympic trials is the picture of me at 24 miles where my sunglasses are on, so you can't see the hurt in my eyes, but I can see the hurt in my face. And that to me was the Olympic trials. And so, and it was similar at the Olympics. You know, I had the best race of my life again at the Olympics. Coach and I had set a goal of being top 10. And I really struggled to get to that goal because it seemed like every time, and I don't know if you experienced this, Dylan, but when I made the team and I'm thinking about the Olympics, I'm like, okay, I got to come up with a goal for the Olympics. And it seemed like the only appropriate goal is top 3. But every time I was like, man, maybe I should set the goal to be top 3, my anxiety would go up and I'd start thinking of all the people that I'd have to beat to be top 3. Did you have any of this experience?
Totally. It's like you don't think about that goal once you've reached it. Like, okay, I've made the Olympics. Now what? What else are you supposed to do?
Right. Well, and every media person that you talk to just is like leaning into you because they want you to say you're going to bring home hardware.
Right.
And anyway, so I remember really struggling over that goal. And it was just one day when Coach Eyestone said, hey, Jared, I really think you can be top 10 at the Olympics, that I thought, yeah, that would be exciting. And I ran a tough race at the Olympics. It was hot again. It was humid. Lots of people fell back. In fact, I remember coming up on somebody with 22 miles or so into the race. And as I got closer, I was like, oh, that's a Kenyan jersey. Like, who is that? And then I got a little bit closer and I was like, oh, that's Stanley Biwott of Kenya. And I thought he was the second best person in the race. And I was like, next to Kipchoge. And I was like, I'm going to pass Stanley Biwott. And then I got like 10 steps from like getting closer to him. I was probably 10 steps from him. And he like steps off the course and rips off his bib. And I was like, no, you can't. You can drop out, but not until I pass you. But it was during this part of the race where I was just moving up and things were progressing really well. And I hit the finish line, finished 6th. In fact, I actually thought that I was 7th. And so when they started telling me I was 6th, that was just gravy. But I crossed the line so excited because I had been top 10 that some of the media made fun of me for being the most excited 6th place finisher they'd ever seen at the Olympics. But I just think that goal of being top 10 was the right goal for me. And I think because I had the right goal, it pushed me to finishing higher than I would have had I been like half the other people in that race and said, well, my goal is top 3. And then when you're no longer in contention, then you drop out or you die, or there's nothing motivating you to get to the line. And so I think I learned a lesson in proper goal setting and also just in running the mile that I was in and just kind of chipping things off one at a time. So again, that my Olympic experience was kind of summed up in the opportunity to learn about myself and the opportunity to run in some incredible races. And I had fun too. I went to the opening ceremonies. Saucony was, they told me after the fact that they were all talking in the office every day through the Olympics. They're about, they look at Instagram pictures and the Rio Olympics were less well attended. So athletes had access to tickets to almost any event we wanted to go to. And so I went to everything. I probably went to 20 events before I ran the marathon. And I guess back at HQ in Boston, the Saucony team was just talking about how great it was that I was having a good experience and I was at the Olympics, and they thought that I had written off the race and I was just having a good time. But I think I was fortunate to be able to kind of have both. I had a good race, but also an incredible experience.
If anything, it probably kept your mind off the race.
Yeah, I don't know that it's good to just lay in the athlete village for 20 days before you race. So I tend to agree with that, but there are some athletes that disagree. So,
yeah. All right. Well, let's move on. And I don't really want to dwell on this because you said it's your least favorite race, but to the 2012 or 2020 trials, I should say. So Dylan and I both had you as locks. We talked the day of the race, and going in, and I feel like we jinxed you. But then you were I was listening to you on Kara Goucher's podcast, and you gave yourself 70%, so I didn't feel so bad. And so the race obviously didn't go as planned, like for anybody. It was crazy out there. And so I noted after the race, you did a bunch of interviews, and you said it took a few days to get over the process, or to kind of get over, so you could like almost process that post-race disappointment. So a lot of people on here have had disappointing races. I've had disappointing races. Can you give us some tips for kind of how you went through that processing?
Well, yeah, there's a couple of things. It was tough, and just like everybody else, after a bad race, I question everything from any good race that I've ever had in my life to every little thing building into this race. And I was even questioning if all these good races I'd had were flukes, and if the Olympic trials was really, the caliber that I am relative, it's just crazy how tough we can be on ourselves. And I don't know, I think one thing that honestly helped me was talking with Des Linden it was actually like 2 weeks after the race. And she said something like, I normally give myself 48 hours to sulk, and then I just tell myself, get over it. And I thought, you know what, it's been 2 weeks since the race. I need to get over it. And, it was hard enough emotionally that I couldn't start to think about it because I was just too emotional about it. I couldn't think about it objectively, and I couldn't break it apart and try to analyze things that I did well or things that I did poorly. And then, Des telling me to get over it kind of was the kick in the pants that I needed. And I started to get over it. And I think since then, I've realized that there were some good things that I did in that race. I think I positioned myself really well, and I think I put myself in the right place. I think that, the race humbled me. I went in with high expectations, and when we hit halfway at 2:11 flat pace and there were 30 guys in this pack on these windy hills, I think I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready mentally to be running that hard and to race 30 guys. I was ready mentally to be running that hard and race 5 guys, or I was ready to be in a pack of 30 guys but feel really within myself. But I just wasn't prepared for that many guys to show up on that day and be like 30 guys racing for a spot on that team. I wasn't ready for that. And so I think it was a lesson to me that I wouldn't have told anyone before the race that I was expecting this to come easy. I wouldn't have even told myself that, but I think in hindsight, I wasn't really mentally prepared to go out there and hurt like I had in races that had brought me the success that I've had. And so it was a little bit of a wake-up call. And I think back to other experiences in my life. I think back to my last race in college was the qualifier for nationals. And I had developed a stress fracture in my leg a week before and decided to run the qualifier anyways. And in the middle of the race, my leg broke the rest of the way through. So the fracture just broke through the bone. And so my college season ended with me being the fittest I'd ever been in my life, but with a broken leg and not at nationals. But I came home, I asked the doctor to spin me a waterproof cast, and I started swimming. And I hate swimming, but I started swimming with that cast, and I tried to stay fit. And probably 4 months after that, I ran the second marathon of my life, and I ran 2:14 and was really, really happy with it, and started to have some road success in the marathon. And so I think what I look at is opportunities to take wins from races that weren't good races. So the Olympic trials, to me, it wasn't a good race, but I can either chalk it up as a bad race and try to forget it, or I can look at the race and find some things that I did well and use those things that I did well to reinforce my confidence for the next race. Even though maybe there weren't a lot of things I did well, I think there are some things I did really well. And so I'm going to use those to channel into my next race, and I'm going to approach my future with the confidence that I've overcome things before that were tough, and I'm going to try to do it again. And I don't know, maybe, and we never know when our best years for racing are over until they're probably 2 or 3 years over. But I don't think it does us any good to wonder if the best years are over. So I'm going to keep approaching running like I got more years ahead of me and attack it, and we'll see what happens.
Awesome attitude. So were you more stressed out about your result, or I know you were talking to Connor from Running Warehouse, and you went on a cruise after during the whole COVID thing. So which one stressed you out more?
The race, but by halfway through that cruise, I wanted off that ship.
Fair enough. Okay, Dylan, so you can't compete in the Olympic trials, but you were trying to make the Olympics this time as well. And you were using Boston to kind of get that standard. And especially with all the Americans having raced, I guess there was a slightly easier path to get through because there weren't a lot of American guys. So I thought you had a pretty good chance for the top 10. So I guess in a similar vein to Jared, can you kind of talk about the disappointment of your race being canceled? And I guess a lot of people on here are also having races canceled. So can you relate to that in some way and talk about how you got over that process?
Yeah, it's definitely a weird spot to be in. I think, for myself, but for everyone right now who's had races canceled, and for me, my initial instinct was just to set another goal for another race and move on. But I realized that I didn't really give myself the chance, just in the way you kind of Jared described, kind of mourning a bad race and sulking on it. I realized that it's okay to kind of lament the fact that this race that you've prepared for so many months isn't going to happen, and to give yourself, again, a few days. I think I was more like a week of being, really disappointed and kind of feeling lost without that race on the horizon to aim for, but then really needing to pick up the pieces and focus on it was kind of an opportunity for me to focus. I didn't have the kind of outcomes of, of having the race and knowing, did it go well, did it not go well? But there's still things that through your training that you can improve, little weaknesses maybe that have cropped, you like creep into your routine that you can kind of work on, and just to make yourself a better athlete. So I think for me, that was kind of the shift in focus and the impetus to actually use the squat rack behind me and all that stuff is to be, it is an opportunity to kind of hone your craft and be a better overall athlete, maybe work on some of the mental side of our sport that a lot of people kind of tend to neglect. Once you get into a really good routine of a good training groove and you're really focused on a race, that's something that often goes by the wayside. So I've done some of that stuff, and I think it's an opportunity for everyone to kind of do that and get all their ducks in a row to set themselves up for future races where they can really put everything behind it and really go for it.
Cool. So transitioning a little bit, let's talk a little bit about coaching, because you're both coaching now. So Dylan, you run your own coaching company, but I guess we'll keep doing the Jared Dylan thing. So Jared, you're starting to coach online now too. Can you talk a little bit about that and how it's been rewarding for you, or not rewarding, one of the two?
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely been rewarding. And I think that I'd hesitated to jump into it just because of it's not even that like coaching has to be very time consuming, but I feel like I tend to overschedule myself and it puts too much on my mind, and that just balancing all of the to-do things can be stressful, maybe even more than the time demand. And so I've always hesitated to jump into coaching, and I even did some coaching over email and things like that, and it just became a stress. But I connected with this guy named Andrew Webb in Texas, and he has become the point person for it all, and has really allowed me, reduced the stress from me down to just coaching and getting on, and it's group coaching. So it's not one-on-one per se, but it's a lot like this. In fact, it's a Zoom call with maybe 20 or so people on it, depending on the different calls that we post later. And there's a chat box and we do a little Q&A. And so it's a lot like this. And that's been really rewarding. It's been fun to talk about my experience and to hear other people's experiences and frankly, to learn from the people that I'm coaching too. And it's been a blessing that Andrew has taken on the kind of the logistical stress of it. And so that it just can be something fun for me. And pretty jazzed when Des Linden decided to co-coach with me. And so that's been a lot of fun, working alongside her and continuing to learn from Desi. But yeah, it really is rewarding. Coaching's fun.
That's a dynamic duo if there ever was one. Jared Ward and Des Linden.
I know. That's amazing.
Dylan, can you talk about the M2M experience? And you don't kind of have the logistical support Jared has. Well,
I need to tap into his buddy.
We need to connect you with Andrew. That's
this guy in Texas. It sounds like someone that could help me. Yeah, I mean, similarly to Jared, getting into coaching for me was like an opportunity to connect with others and to kind of share what I realized more and more as I got deeper into my running career was that I had this wealth of knowledge that was, worthwhile sharing with other people. And it's amazing once you kind of make those connections, how meaningful it is and how much you can learn about yourself and about other people and them contributing to your kind of day-to-day learning and you being able to contribute to their goals in running is really fun. And being able to do it in person has been really rewarding for me. As a runner, I didn't I trained alone a lot or in very small groups, so didn't outside of once I was done in university, I didn't have a lot of that team kind of atmosphere and didn't realize how much I missed it till I started coaching groups of people in person. I consider myself an introvert, but once I get out there with that group and I'm coaching, I really thrive in that environment. So that's something that I've just loved to continue to build. And it is just, it's probably something that where there's too many to-do lists that are going on, but I just love being able to be in that environment and contribute to people's love for the sport.
Awesome. So I'm going to open the floor to questions in just a second. So if you're interested in asking a question, type it in the chat or there's a raise hand function in the participants window. But my final question is about Saucony, and I should note they didn't pay me for this. So Jared, you're wearing your Saucony shirt, and Dylan, you got your shirt and hat on. And although they didn't pay me, I am open for an ambassador role or something, free gear. So if anyone from
we'll see what we can do.
If anyone from Saucony is listening, let me know. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Can you talk to us about Saucony, the support they've given you? So Dylan, I know they work with your coaching group, and Jared, obviously they're a big part of you're a big part of their shoe development even. So talk to us about Saucony, thoughts on the new Endorphin lineup, which I'm super excited for, and anything else you'd like to plug for them while we're here. Jared, go first.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, super impressed with this brand. In fact, I just got off a Zoom call with the other U.S. athletes and the chief marketing director of Saucony about 2 weeks ago, and just reiterated that the brand is standing behind their athletes through the pandemic, and they're going to, there's not going to be a hiccup to support, and just really, I've been impressed with the brand, and it's like it's an industry with a lot of turnover, and so I find myself getting frustrated when someone leaves the brand that I love in HQ and moves on, and I've been with the brand long enough that it's probably 60 or 70% different than when I started. But good culture, and it's been an awesome company to work with. Grateful for their support. I mean, they've been my title sponsor for my entire professional running career. As it relates to the Endorphin, I mean, that shoe was just a fun one to be a part of. I probably received somewhere between 20 and 30 prototypes over the last 2 years. Raced in the first one in the New York City Marathon in 2018, and then in the final version at the New York City Marathon in 2019, and we've been on that version since. That's going to release this summer, and it's a great shoe. I mean, there's quite a bit of R&D that's gone into it. Spencer White, who just retired from Saucony, stuck around to see this one through because he's been developing this foam for a while. The foam's amazing. I think you'll find that compared with other shoes in the same class across brands, that this Saucony Endorphin is going to last a lot more miles. The foam's just a lot more resilient. Additionally, Spencer put a lot of time into the shape of the shoe, and we did some tests and some feedback there. I think the shape of the shoe makes a big difference, and this shoe puts you in a more assertive running position. So I'll be excited, Dylan, to see what you think as you get running in it and experiencing the Endorphin Pro. But I think those are the two huge things with the shoe. Now, the shoe has a plate in it. We're terming this whole class of shoes plated shoes. I don't think that the plate is really the biggest aspect of the shoe, but it facilitates us to be able to use a lower density foam and maybe shape the shoe a little bit differently than in the past. And so you got to have the plate in there, but I don't know that it plays as big of as a critical role as the foam and the shape of the shoe. And I think Spencer and Saucony really made a great shoe.
Yeah, and you can actually try that foam. It's in the Triumph, right?
That's right.
Power Run Plus.
Yeah. Very similar. So it's a beaded foam, beaded Power Run foam. The Endorphin has a little bit of a lower density version, is my understanding. But it's a fantastic foam, and that's it. You know, trying on those Triumph 17s, you just take a couple steps in them, and you're like, oh man, it's like pillows.
Yeah. That was my first impression. I ran in them today. Love them. And I find I'm not beat up as much when I get back from my run.
Yeah, I think, that's something that we're not talking about with these shoes. And for every, from a professional standpoint in a really raw sport, there's obvious drawbacks to major technology advancements and how it creates an unlevel playing field, at least for a little while all these brands catch up. And everybody's talking about that. And I think that there's some validity to that. I think that governing bodies need to step in. I think World Athletics stepping in was a good call. I don't know that they made all the right calls, but they stepped in and regulated a little bit. But I do think that a positive thing from these shoes is that for guys like Dylan and I, it's going to extend our career. I was racing marathons in the Type A's, and I had some good marathons in those, but like Dylan, how many marathons am I going to last pounding my legs in flats?
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so I do think that these shoes are going to prolong the life of a marathoner. And that goes from all the way from the elite marathoners, down through everyday runners. It's just going to allow our bodies to last a little bit longer is my prediction. And so I'm at least grateful for that aspect of these new shoes.
Yeah. Dylan, thoughts on Saucony?
Super cool. Yeah, just following along with much like everyone else in the public, but getting kind of to know that all the research and development that went into a shoe like the Endorphin lineup is really cool. They obviously put a lot of time and energy into it to see some of the athletes like Jared wearing some of the prototypes throughout the years is great. And I think that just shows the attention to detail that they've put into things. It's not like oh yeah, here's the shoe we came out with. Now please tell us what you think. It's like, no, let's involve athletes in the process from day one. Just a really great way to go about things. And I think the end product is going to be awesome for, like Jared says, for everyone from the best of the best, and all the way through to everyone that's going to be running long distance races is super cool. And Saucony as a brand here in Canada, I think they've been really rewarding for myself and for run clubs and run crews to work with. They've really gotten involved in kind of quote unquote kind of the grassroots of recreational running here in Canada, and that's been really cool. They want to be involved in what groups like ours are doing here, and that's been fun to see. They've got a really strong commitment to helping brands like ours, so it's fun.
Awesome. So I got your sponsorship deal in for the day. So if you guys have 15 or so minutes, we'll take some questions. So let's go to Richard. You got your hand up.
Super. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Jared and Dylan for doing this. Just a question for both of you, but obviously as well specifically for Dylan with respect to you were planning to do Boston. I was in the same boat. Instead, I did a solo time trial marathon myself last Monday, and now this training block is done. But looking ahead for the fall season, I'm kind of wondering sort of, where you're at personally and also kind of in general, and maybe recommending to your athletes. I'm looking at, taking at least a month off, but, the thought of kind of doing a whole another training block to kind of keep my fitness or build on top of it, given that Boston, I mean, obviously there's a date, but, the chances of that happening, I'm not a betting person, but I don't know if I put money on that. And the thought of doing another, solo marathon in the fall again, yeah, I'm not sure about that. So yeah, just kind of where do you go from here? Is it just kind of like keep your fitness and kind of keep it fun and lose a little bit of fitness? Is it, kind of go at it anyways and just kind of do whatever you can? Or I don't know, option Q, whatever, I have no idea.
Option Z, all the way down to option Z, right? I think there's opportunity without races on the horizon, and I don't know that Boston will happen. I myself am gonna launch into my training with the anticipation that it will happen, but it's maybe that's being overly optimistic. But I think there's opportunity to work on lots of different things, and I encourage lots of people to maybe spend some time working on speed. I know we all tend to, I said I don't like to do my 20 by 200 workout. But I think this is an opportunity to really work on our weaknesses. And for most people that are doing 2, 3, 4 marathons a year, we tend to miss those important periods of training where you can be doing speed. And those distances are way easier to time trial, right? You can go out and run miles or 5Ks. But even if that's not your not up your alley, something else that I'm encouraging some athletes to do and thought about even doing myself for the fall is picking an odd distance, like 30K is a good distance that maybe the training's not as arduous as training for a marathon, and certainly solo effort. I mean, kudos to you for running a solo marathon. But something like a 30K can get a lot of similar stimulus, probably build fitness for, definitely build good fitness for a future marathon training block, but without maybe beating yourself up in the same way.
Jared?
Yeah, I think that, the first thing that I've told my athletes, and it sounds like I'm very similar to Dylan in sentiments here, but first thing I tell my athletes is we got to find something that you're excited about. And I start with saying, hey, if you're not excited yet about the idea of doing another block on the thought of maybe a marathon happening, then maybe that's not quite the right thing yet, right? And maybe that changes in a month or 2 months or something, but we can still do something that's going to build lifetime fitness towards goals and intersects with something that we're excited about right now. And I do tend to agree with Dylan that like speed is an undervisited, important aspect of training for marathoners. And as we get more and more efficient, you know, our lactate threshold, pace gets faster and some of these things. But if we neglect that VO2 max training, then that's like our ceiling of potential just lowering down on our heads. And so you know, we have right now, Team Endure Strong is about 4 weeks into an 8-week time trialed 5K or a 10K. And so they chose 5K for half the guys. They chose 5K and 10K 4 weeks ago. They ran a time trial. We're training for 8 weeks, and then they're going to run another time trial. And Desi and I put out some training plans on Team Endure Strong that are just free for people that are interested in trying that and visiting speed. And if that's something that's interesting, then you do that. For me right now, I'm just taking a really long reset button because I guess I wouldn't say that I'm a betting man, but I certainly have a betting personality. And so I'm hoping for a fall marathon, and I'm excited about that. And so I'm working on just a long, slow build into that. And my foot was bugging me a little bit at the trials. I don't think it affected the race, but I took the time to heal that up after. And so I've just been back into running for now about 2 weeks, done a lot of biking, and I'm going to just take a really slow, gradual build into the fall. But I think, like Dylan said too, there's a lot of other little stuff we can work on. And I think I've been doing a lot of stuff with bands and trying to strengthen areas on me that I know are susceptible to injury and be a little bit preventative. And we got the time to do that right now. And so, you know, some hip drills. I love dead bug exercises. I love core work that really focuses on tucking your pelvis. So pelvis coming up into your belly button. That kind of stuff puts our body in a good posture, helps make us a little bit more resilient. My hamstrings get tight and sore often because they're not strong enough. And so I've been working on my hamstring strength. And I think some things like that could be good uses of our time right now. But it starts with finding something that you're excited about. And I think when we're excited about something, then the committing to it and following through becomes a little less tough.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, Jared B, your question.
Yeah. It's a two-part question. Do you ever have days in your period, because a lot of people think that elite athletes never have motivational problems. Do you ever have days where motivation is waning? And do you ever have times when you just don't feel like running days? You wake up like, oh, I really don't want to run. And how do you deal with that? And what's your coping mechanism?
Who wants to go first?
Never happens to me. No, I'm just kidding. It does. You know, I think it's interesting, you know, right now, right? So I'm easing back into running after, I don't know how many weeks it's been, 7 or 8 or 9 weeks or how many since the trials. And I did a 10-mile run yesterday, and my legs felt like I ran 20 miles by the time I got home. And it's amazing how fast I feel like I can go from being in the best shape of my life. I really think before the Olympic trials, I think I was in the best shape of my life, to being like, dang, I can't even run 10 miles back-to-back days without just feeling wrecked. And it's not as fun. You know, I get on my treadmill over here in this room, and like, I get like points, like I get like 1K into the run, and I'm like already feeling like the run has gone on for a long time.
That's how I feel about treadmills too.
I don't know. It's just like, so yeah, I'm kind of in one of those slumps a little bit right now where it is, you know, I get up in the morning and I'm just not quite ready to do it. But I think I trust the process. I trust that I'll get back to where it was fun and where I was when I loved it. And I also trust that when I force myself to get up and get out of bed and get exercising, that I'm going to feel better. And I think between those two things, just trusting that I'll feel better today and trusting that if I put my head down, I'm going to get back to that spot and it's worth it because I love it when I'm there. That kind of gets me going.
Yeah, I think similar to Jared, it's for me, even though when I'm in a really hard, really intense training block, uh, I'm often more tired and more fatigued. That's when my motivation is highest and it's easiest to get out the door. It's those times when you're transitioning between training phases or just getting back into it when it's hardest. And it definitely, there's definitely days where I'd rather just stay home and hang out with the kids than get out the door for the run. But knowing kind of knowing that greater purpose of the training and why I'm doing it and what the motivation is what gets me out the door most days.
All right, we got time for a couple more questions. So if you have one, raise your hand or throw it in the chat. Teresa has one here, and I wrote this one down too, but I didn't ask it because I thought she was going to ask it. So you're both parents. So first of all, can you talk a little bit about running and being a parent? And then her question was, do you use mantras? And then what are they? And Jared, I'll start with you because I really liked your mantra at the trials. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, thanks. A lot of it was built around, you know, me showing, doing something for my kids. And, they are getting, my oldest is 8 now. And so they're now getting to the age where they can recognize that dad's trying hard for something, I guess, is about where they're at. But knowing that this was an investment for me and for my family, and we were going for it. And so I was thinking about them during the race. And in fact, it was my kids that made it worth it to me to get to the finish line. At about mile 20, I was thinking, well, I'm not going to finish top 3. My foot's kind of bugging me. If I stop now, I'll probably do a little less damage to my foot. And that would make sense. And at the time I was even thinking, yeah, Boston's in 8 weeks. I'm in the best shape of my life. If I stop at 20 miles and can rehab this foot, I can probably have a good race at Boston, or another spring marathon, or just be able to jump back into training that much sooner and get ready for the fall. And but then it was me realized, then I had this thought. So I actually pictured myself dropping out of the race. There's kind of a strategic place where I could kind of walk back to the finish area. It would be less than a mile from where I dropped out. And I thought, so I'm just going to walk over to the finish area and connect with my kids on the other side of the fence that are like watching for me to come in. And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to finish this race because I want my kids to know that even when things are tough or they're not going as well as you want them to, you can still do something that's hard. And maybe it's still worth doing. And I'm so grateful that I had that thought because, and I'm grateful that I finished the trials. And I pulled the plug and I tried to go at a pace that wasn't going to do a lot more damage to my foot. And so I definitely adjusted, I think for my long-term, better in the long run. But I wanted to make it to that finish line because my kids were there and I want them to know that tough things are worth it. But I have a different mantra for every race, and I pick it. I call it a power statement, but it's the same thing as a mantra. It's a few words that I can rely on when things get tough that take me back to why I was training for this race and why it was worth it. Last time I ran Boston, my mantra was because I can. And that seemed to work when the hills were hard at Heartbreak. That seemed to work when I was leading the race at Wellesley. And it seemed to work when the lead pack was pulling away in the end, but I was still running my sub 5 minute pace. And because I can really worked well for me. Now, sometimes I choose a mantra and I tell myself in the race when it gets hard and I think, oh, that mantra sucks. Why did I think that was going to be a good mantra? But I really try to be strategic in how I select those so that can be the magic that gets me back on the track. So mantras are important to me.
Dylan?
Yeah, I think to what Jared said, it's like for me, I definitely use mantras, but they're very specific to kind of where I'm at in a particular training phase, kind of what's motivated me through a block of training, what's going on in life at that time, things I'm thinking about, stuff that's going on. So it's there's no one mantra that I've stuck to kind of throughout my career, but it's something that you can grab onto and is going to motivate you and kind of be able to pick you up when the going gets tough really late in a race. And so yeah, it's got to be something that's super meaningful at that moment in your life.
All right, great. So I will ask one more question and then I'll let you both go. Thank you so much for your time. So can you kind of speak to the depth in Canadian and American distance running in general at the moment? So I think right now both countries are kind of are in almost a golden age of depth for distance running, especially on the women's side in the marathon, as we saw at the US trials, and that we're seeing in Canada, now that we're down to a 2:24 Canadian record. So yeah, can you just talk about how awesome it is, and why do you think we're at this point right now? Jared?
Yeah, so I think that we're kind of in an unprecedented marathoning era in the world right now as well. We're seeing world records fall, and I think that that a lot of that's been credited to footwear, and in some ways I think that's a shame, because I think Eliud Kipchoge is the best male marathoner ever, but every time he steps up to a race, the conversation is what's on his feet. And so while shoes are part of the equation, certainly, and we're seeing faster and faster times, 2:07 and 2:08 for men on a world level just aren't the same thing as they were 5 years ago. But I think that we're just kind of in an era, and I think part of it is just a critical mass. Like when everybody's running faster, others just latch onto that and believe that they can. And so I think it goes, the reality that eras happen on cycles, to me, is just evidence of the power of the mind. And that when someone else is doing it, other people try to do it as well. And we are in one of those eras. And it's been a fun to be a part of, and it's been fun to be a part of it on the American side. But also to be a part of marathoning worldwide right now. And I think hopefully we have a few more years of this era.
Dylan?
Yeah, I think it's been really neat to see there be such a strong development of women's marathoning in Canada. And I think a lot of it is just people, just really being willing, seeing others commit to it and go for it, and that's inspired them to do the same. And I think it speaks a lot to if we put our mind to it, we can really achieve things that we didn't think we could. We've got, I think, 2 of our top female marathoners are in their 40s or approaching their 40s anyway, right? Late 30s. And maybe in a past era that these women wouldn't have even been trying at the sport at this point in their lives. So it's really cool to see people not kind of putting those barriers on themselves that we would typically think are things that would have people no longer participating in the sport. And now we're seeing them at their best, and at the best we've ever seen in Canada, which is really cool.
Awesome. So Jared, when are you coming to Canada again?
I had so much fun in Vancouver last year that I hope it's soon. That was my first time ever to Canada, and it was awesome. So I hope soon.
I know the elite athlete coordinator of the Ottawa Marathon over there.
You know a guy, eh? Yeah, well, we'll see what we can do.
I love it.
It's kind of a hilly course though, so you got to come ready to work hard.
Shoot, count me out then.
Yeah, that's not up Jared's alley at all.
All right. Well, thanks guys so much for your time. This was awesome. We're getting a lot of thanks in the comments, so I appreciate that. I'm gonna try and edit this and put it on YouTube so you can watch yourselves again later. And thanks so much, Jared. I'm a big fan, so it's been awesome to talk to you. And Dylan, thanks.
Super fun. Super fun to connect, Jared.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Okay. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.
We'll see you.